March 11th, 2024. It's episode 60 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I'm joined by Mike Koomar. And today we're going to go over the Big 12 all-conference teams and a little bit of a conference tournament preview for the team that's going to have the most bids out of any team in the Big Dance. So, Mike, we want to start off with something that you're pretty passionate about. This tournament's in Kansas City, Missouri. It's always there. Why is that a bad thing?
Sean, it's a terrible thing. First off, Kansas City, Missouri, how many Big 12 schools are in the state of Missouri? I'll give you a hint. It's none after Missouri left in 2010. Now, understood, Kansas is right down the road. So you know what? This playing in Kansas City has a massive advantage for three schools: Kansas, Kansas State, and Iowa State, which is also very close. But none of the rest of the schools in the Big 12 Conference are even close. There's no one even close to it. The Big 12 headquarters is in Irving, Texas. It's right in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. You've got two great arenas in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. You play at American Airlines Arena, home to the Dallas Mavericks, or you could play at Dickies Arena in Fort Worth that seats about 18,000 people. Both are in the heart of the Big 12, which is the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. That's where you can get main people from Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Texas, TCU, Baylor. I can go on and on. And not to mention, DFW Airport is probably the biggest hub of any of the Big 12 Conference. Very easy to get to. Direct flights there every day of the week. So guys like West Virginia, UCF, and guys like Brigham Young can get there easily. Sean, I grew up flying out of Newark Airport. Kansas City Airport has got to be one of the worst airports in America. That place sucks. So not only are they playing at a place that's a blatant advantage to Kansas and Kansas State and Iowa State, blatant advantage, but they're also going into a really bad airport to fly into. So it's just really inaccessible to the rest of the teams in the Big 12 Conference, especially the ones that have been there for years and years. So it's a really, really terrible choice. I could keep going on and on about this one, but they need to get it out of there and get it to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex or Oklahoma City.
It has been there for a while in recent memory, if I'm not mistaken, right?
It's been at the Sprint/T-Mobile Center in Kansas City since I believe 2010. They did go back and forth between Kansas City, Oklahoma City, and the DFW Metroplex for a long time, but in the early 2010s, they made that switch over.
Yeah, I think especially with the new teams coming into the conference next year, Mike, a rotating model is definitely the way to go. You see it in the ACC. We just talked about that. You see it in the Big Ten, which we'll get to on Wednesday. Now, the Big East doesn't have a rotating model, but Madison Square Garden, that's their thing.
Yeah,
That's their thing.
Yeah, it is.
I don't think anyone would really mind if it was in Kansas City like once out of every 5 years, but every year it's a really big advantage for a team that's going to need every bit of it this year, Mike. We'll talk about that later. But
and the crazy thing too, Sean, is since they moved the tournament to Kansas City, a school that has not been Iowa State or Kansas has only won twice. That was Texas. They won the Big 12 tournament twice. And understood, a lot of that is because Kansas has been one of the best teams in the land, probably the most consistent team in the country for the last 15 years. However, there have been plenty of other opportunities for other teams to certainly grab a title here. And the home court advantage, the blatant home court advantage with KU 45 minutes away, just is a dead giveaway.
Yeah, so the location stinks. We hope that they, with Arizona coming in and UCF joining this year, that they maybe will think about it's a national conference now, so maybe they'll start thinking about making it, a national venue.
Yeah.
So, Mike, we're going to start off with our awards, as we did with the ACC just a couple minutes ago. Player of the Year is Jamal Shead. No surprise. He gets Defensive Player of the Year as well. Houston's first year in the Big 12, and their guy gets Player of the Year.
Yeah, Houston cleaning up in their first year. How about getting Coach of the Year, Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year by the number one overall team country, and they won their conference outright, which is not easy to do in a super competitive Big 12. But, hey, right now Houston is the team to beat in the country as far as I'm concerned. They are a phenomenal team, a phenomenally coached team by a veteran coach, Sean. Kelvin Sampson, a guy that you had in Indiana before he, got caught cheating. But neither here nor there. they have done a phenomenal job in their first year. We did not expect them to be as good.
So rounding out the first team, Mike, is Tim and Lipsy from Iowa State, best player on the second best team. Makes sense. So we've got the Kansas duo of Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough, who we'll get to later. And then Dylan Dessou from Texas sneaking into that fifth spot in the first team. He missed some time this year. Was this a little bit surprising to you?
It's certainly a little surprising to me. He is the most improved player in the Big 12, and he played phenomenally, right? He kind of carried the momentum from the NCAA tournament last year. I think it is certainly a little surprising that he got into the first team selection. I thought LJ Cryer was certainly, or Max Asmuth, his teammate, were potentially better suited for that. But the committee decided to go with Dylan Dessou as to round out the first team All Big 12. So for me, certainly an interesting selection there.
Yeah, Dessou definitely changes the game for Texas. When he was out and they were struggling, they immediately got better when he came back, and he still took a minute to kind of get going. Their two-man game is really good. Their two-man game could have them knock off a 1 or 2 seed if it comes to it. But I'm just, he didn't play as much, and other players in other conferences have been punished for missing ball games, and it doesn't appear that he was here. Second team, Mike, we got Ray J. Dennis from Baylor, LJ Cryer from Houston, Keyshawn Gilbert from Iowa State, Emmanuel Miller from TCU, and Max Asmus from Texas. Now, the third team's just below it, Mike, so the YouTubers can see it, but let's talk about the second team here. Just so many good players in this conference that those 5 are second teamers, and you kind of just have to be okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, Ray J. Dennis, LJ Cryer, and Max Asmuth, even Emmanuel Miller, and pretty much any other conference, those guys are first teamers. I remember when I first saw the first team list in the Big 12, and I thought, where's Ray J. Dennis? Where's LJ Cryer? But there's just too much talent in the Big 12 to put them all in the first team. You just can't. So, it is what it is. Those are second teamers. They're phenomenal players. And as far as I'm concerned, a couple of them are probably Naismith finalists. I don't know if that award, the finalists have been announced, but certainly I think you could put Ray J or LJ Cryer in that running.
Yeah, Miller too. He's the best player on a good TCU team. I had him as first teamer beginning of the year, and I don't think he's really played all that bad to finish in the second team. He's the best player on a decent TCU team.
Oh, he's been phenomenal.
Third team, Mike, we got Jalen Bridges and Jacoby Walter from Baylor, Juwan Roberts from Houston, Pop Isaacs, and Darion Williams from Texas Tech. More really solid players here.
Yeah, a lot of really good players. A couple of Baylor representation here. Look, Jalen Bridges, as a Baylor fan, he's probably one of my favorite guys that I've seen or get to watch since I've been cheering for Baylor since my enrollment there. Just a really phenomenal player. He just does everything the right way, and he doesn't have a whole lot of flaws to his game. Jacoby Walter, we're talking about a lottery pick with this guy, and he finishes in the third team All Big 12. He certainly did not play that well coming down the stretch. He was a very inconsistent player for Baylor, and honestly, I'm a little surprised he got into the third team. But with that being said, as much as I hate to say it, Pop Isaacs, hell of a player for Texas Tech. Also stellar is Darion Williams. So really competitive. I thought the only guy that you could have maybe slipped in is perhaps you moved Yves Meetsy in for Baylor rather than Jacoby Walter. But when you look at this Baylor team, they were the first 2 players, or not the first 2, but 2 players on that honorable mention. Pretty much their entire rotation of players was all Big 12, either honorable mention or second or third team.
Yeah, I think Baylor definitely got punished a little bit for kind of having a bunch of good players, and that's why that's why they had to. Dennis was on the second team, and you have 2 on the third team. I mean, nobody has three players like that in the league, and it's just how these voting things work. They're individual awards, and you much rather win the team things, but unfortunately, I do think they're punished for kind of having a lot of good players around them. But Mike, big shocking thing for me from this.
And I will say, I do think.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Langston Love, if he had not sat out for as long as he did, he would have been 6th man of the year. But because he had missed about 4 weeks, that gave that award to Jackson Robinson. But go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, Mike, I think BYU not having somebody shocking because they are staring down the barrel of a 4 seed if Kansas happens to lose in the first round. Like BYU is going to be a 4 seed if the bracketing rules allow. There can only be 4 teams from each conference in the top 4 seeds. BYU is fifth right now. Unfortunately, they're probably ahead of one of the SEC teams that occupies a 4 seed, but can't do it because of bracketing rules. But to not have a player in the first 3 teams, I think that's a little bit harsh on the Cougars, who've had a pretty tremendous season.
Yeah, I mean, the Cougars have had an outrageously good season, way better than any of us expected. And you could have put Spencer Johnson or Jackson Robinson in those Big 12 teams. But, my question is who you got? I don't think you take out anybody in the first 2 teams. And in the third team, I think the only guy you could take out is maybe either Darian Williams or Jacoby Walter. Everybody else, I think, deserves to be there. And it sounds weird because BYU is such a phenomenal team this year, and they really are. I think they got 3 or 4 players in all Big 12 honorable mention, but I just don't know who you would take out other than maybe those 2 guys.
Yeah, it's certainly every conference does it differently. How to pick these teams, it certainly seems harsh for me without knowing exactly how they do it on BYU, who don't have like a tremendously deep rotation. They have a couple really good players like Robinson, especially. He's their go-to guy, and I think he could find it pretty frustrating that he doesn't find his name on the list. So, Mike, we're going to go to the tournament preview now. We are going to bring up the tournament bracket for the YouTube viewers and Spotify listeners. We're looking at the Big 12 tournament bracket. It will be posted on the Instagram at some point. This also starts tomorrow, Mike, with the extra teams. We've got Central Florida and Oklahoma State leading it off, and then Cincinnati and West Virginia wrapping it up. Not much to look out for from these 2 games, is there?
Yeah, I don't think so. It'll be kind of interesting. You have the Bob Huggins legacy game down at the bottom of the bracket, West Virginia versus Cincinnati, a team that he coached a long time ago and successfully. But either way, I think they're going to run into Kansas, who kind of becomes a buzzsaw when they're playing in the home crowd of the T-Mobile Arena. So, I don't think we're going to see much out of these teams. You never know. You could see Central Florida potentially get one against Brigham Young, but, I just don't see it happening.
Yes. Kansas, Mike, you just mentioned them. It will be playing in front of a majority home crowd, but Bill Self announced today that the 2 first-team Big 12 players who are on their team, Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough, will not play in the Big 12 tournament. This is a huge blow for them because those 2 are on the first team, and they're very limited with their rotation. How is this going to go for the Jayhawks?
Yeah, I actually hadn't heard that news. I think that does really help Cincinnati. Cincinnati is a team that desperately needs wins in the tournament if they want to have any chance of getting in. They probably got to beat West Virginia. They got to beat Kansas. They got to beat Baylor. And then, who knows? Maybe they're right there on the bubble. But that does certainly change the way that they're going to play. Kansas is not a deep team. You could tell that they took McCullers out for the second half of the Houston game. They're already down by 20. They just didn't really feel the need. And I think Bill Self was kind of resigned to getting a 4 or a 5 seed right now. Kansas has been as bad as we've seen them under the Bill Self era. So maybe this is just Bill Self just trying to get healthy before the tournament. It seems like this has been one of the most disappointing teams in college basketball this year, Sean. I would go as far to say.
Yeah, they did announce that they will both be back for the NCAA tournament, and they'll both be 100% healthy by then. Now, that is 100% appeasing to the committee so that they don't get nicked to seed line.
Yeah, right.
The committee is pretty ruthless with injuries in the past. We've seen it, even going back to 10, 12 years ago. That's why there's, if somebody goes down this time of year, like Kolek from Marquette, they're like, it took like 3 days until Marquette even told people what the injury was to Kolek. Like, they are not letting information get out. It's not, well, it might be considered soon, but as of now, it's not a professional sport where, the media and the teams have to release an injury report. All they have to do is tell the team
disclose injuries,
questionable or out before the game. And Questionable could mean a whole lot of different things. That's all the teams have to tell each other. So, Kansas is definitely doing that for the committee. I think, Mike, with a starting lineup of most likely, let's see, Harris, Furphy, Timberlake, Braun, and Adams, like, I they don't want to go on a long run.
They're playing the same 5 games. No.
They don't want to go on a long run.
I don't think they do.
Because they don't want to get tired out. Maybe just try and win one and then lose to a team in Baylor who's pretty good. It won't punish you that much, and then see if you can suit up for the NCAA tournament.
And the irony in this is that if they'll play a Baylor team, they'll play a Baylor team that just doesn't really care about the Big 12 tournament ever. Like Baylor, since I enrolled there in 2017, has won one Big 12 tournament game. And they've had a couple of really good teams. So it'll be kind of an interesting matchup. I could see that Baylor-Kansas one being kind of a pillow fight.
Yeah, and that's why I think Cincinnati might be able to knock them off, especially having played the day before. Now, like early on, when you see the teams that have played the day before and then the teams that are there for the first time, early on the teams that have been played the day before are going. And Kansas won't be able to dig themselves out of a hole, even with the fans. So I think Cincinnati has a good chance of winning that ball game if they do knock off West Virginia. And then, Mike, after Wednesday, really, like, I know teams are trying to boost their seed lines, but all these teams that are in the tournament already have good wins against the Big 12. What is another one really going to do? I don't think a lot. I think after Oklahoma and TCU square up in the 8-9 game on Wednesday early afternoon, both those teams are sliding, unfortunately, a little bit. But after that, there's not a whole lot that matters in this tournament.
Yeah, I think the only one that could really matter is Kansas State. They need a win against Texas. And look, I think that, a lot of the bracketologies I've seen have put Kansas State well out of the tournament. I just don't see how you put an 8-10 team in this Big 12 that far out of the tournament. And they might be right, but I don't think it's fair. Kansas State has 3 wins against top 10 teams this year. 3, including a big one against Iowa State this past Saturday. So I think if they beat Texas, maybe they get back into the talk of being in. But they definitely need another win against Iowa State. I think if they get those 2, Sean, I think they got to be in. I don't know how you can get them out.
Yeah, well, they got to get back in the conversation. But like you said, their resume stacks up well against the other ones when they're in the conversation. The problem is they're just not. So it's sort of like an Ohio State situation in the Big Ten. Like, they have the good wins.
Yeah.
If they can just get their resume to be compared to a Providence or Indiana State or New Mexico or something like that, it might hold up. But Oklahoma and TCU, it's not a playing game. The loser will still be in the tournament. If a bunch of bubble teams win, they might
be last 4 in, though.
They might be last 4 in and go to Dayton, especially TCU, because they have a terrible non-conference strength of schedule. Oklahoma, scheduled pretty well, especially for the Big 12 this year. A lot of Big 12 non-conference SOSs in the 300s, like Iowa State. But once you get past that, Mike, Houston is going to be a number 1 seed in the South region. Doesn't matter if they're the 1, 2, or 3 overall seed, really. They're going to be playing in the same place. Maybe an Iowa State can jump them if Iowa State wins a head-to-head, but at this point, like we're every game means the same, and you're one of 30-something games here. Obviously, you want to hang a banner if you can, but we talked about this before. Teams don't necessarily want to burn themselves out so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's absolutely what Kansas is doing here. With some of these teams that go the length in the Big 12 tournament, they fall short early on in the NCAA tournament. We've seen it before, so that's some to certainly look out for.
And so the tournament will be starting Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and the Big 12 champion will be crowned on Saturday, which is a big deal, being that those teams get an extra day of rest from the teams that have to play their championship games on Sunday. And that's kind of a big deal. That's the Big 12 tournament bracket. Quick look at the bracketology. We've got Houston as that number 1 seed in the South. Like I mentioned, I've got Baylor's the last two going to the East in UConn's region. Then I've got Iowa State as the 3 in Purdue's region, which is the Midwest. Then I got Kansas as the 4 in the West region. BYU is the first 5 back in the East region. Texas Tech is the 7 in the South region. And then we got Texas as the 8 in the West region. Oklahoma and TCU 10 seeds right now in the Midwest and South regions. And then there really isn't any team, Mike, in this conference that is playing a do-or-die must-win game unless you get a Kansas State or Cincinnati run to the semifinals or something like that. Oftentimes the 8-9 game, or maybe even in the future, this 8-9 game in the Big 12 might be a play-in game, but both those teams are safe for now. And there is no true play-in game in this conference tournament like we might see in some of the other ones.
No, absolutely not. And I think, like you said, Sean, I think, unfortunately, Kansas State has to beat Texas and beat Iowa State to be in the conversation. I think it sucks because I think they are better than a lot of teams that will get into the tournament, but they got to do something special here in Kansas City.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a ton of bracketology to look out for here. The committee does have to watch the championship games that'll be on Friday and Saturday of the teams that are definitely going to be in the field. There's there's rumors out there that the committee doesn't even watch the power conference tournaments once you get past Friday. So, we'll just have to see then if there are some years where teams have got a little bump because of their semifinal or Big 12 tournament win, and there's other times where the team Iowa State, for example, could have their seed line and their location by Friday afternoon, and just how it is. Can't 70-something games on Saturday. Can't watch them all. The last thing we're gonna do, Mike.
Absolutely.
Last thing we're gonna do, Mike, is prediction time. Now I think this one is of most of them, or of the power conference tournament brackets that we're gonna do. This one could go really any direction.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different directions this one could go, and Sean, this might be a surprise to our listeners here. But I'm going to pick the quarterfinal game 9. The winner of Kansas State and Iowa State is going to win the Big 12 championship. I think Kansas State has a hell of a good chance to beat Iowa State and then knock off Baylor. But you look at that path, Baylor in years past did not play well in Kansas City. I don't know if it's a lack of effort or if they're just not good when they get to the tournament. Kansas, you look at the bottom of that bracket as well. We know all of their injuries. So I think whoever wins that game of Kansas State and Iowa State is going to steamroll their way to the Big 12 championship game, or who knows where they could face. I think there's a good chance they face Houston, but also Texas Tech can kind of show up in these big-time moments, and don't count out Brigham Young. So I do think it'll probably end up being a 2-1, Houston versus Iowa State. And with that home crowd advantage, they call the T-Mobile Arena Hilton North because of how well Iowa State plays there. And I think they're going to get another Big 12 tournament championship come Saturday.
Yeah, so Mike's got the Cyclones, the team that the metrics love, and that the anti-analytics bad teams. Now they've certainly backed it up with a bunch of good wins in the Big 12, but we'll see what happens there. Obviously, their 2 seed is theirs if they do win it all. The committee can look at the score GameCast on ESPN and Iowa State won, they'll be that 2 seed. Okay. Yeah. I've got Baylor losing to Houston in the championship game. I just think Baylor's style of play, I know you said it's not good in a tournament style, Mike, or they haven't done well in the Big 12 tournament. Their style plays in the tournament, especially when teams get tired after playing a couple days in a row. You got multiple options, as we said, was a negative for the awards early on. Well, that's a positive when you're getting to Game 4 in as many days. So I think Houston's toughness will just be a little bit too much for them in the championship. And I've got the Cougars winning it all. But, Mike, other than the teams playing on Tuesday, if anybody wins this, would you truly be surprised?
No, I mean, really not. I think, of the teams playing on Wednesday, I'd certainly be surprised.
Tuesday. Any team that's playing on Wednesday or later. 1 through 10.
Yeah, I think the only teams that I would be surprised if they won Wednesday or later would be OU and TCU. I think everybody else's tournament is wide open for, especially that 10 seed Kansas State. Watch out for Coach Tang's team. They play well in tournament games, and they're going to be playing in practically a home crowd in that first one against UT. So watch out for the Wildcats.
Yeah, it should be an interesting one. You know, the TV situation, which Mike and I have kind of talked on and off throughout the season, of how kind of not well set up it is. It sucks for this tournament too, Mike, and unfortunately, the the games on Tuesday are going to be on ESPN Plus and the Big 12 Network. So
Two of the games on Wednesday.
yeah, so that's unfortunate.
Crazy.
Thursday you do get ESPN, and then the Baylor game, Mike, on Thursday night is also on ESPN Plus. ESPN promises all these conferences that their championship games will be on ESPN or ESPN2 or the U. So that's why those times are locked up, and then you've got NBA on Wednesday and NHL on Thursday. But it is really unfortunate and something that has to change soon because there's more teams being added to this conference, Mike. And I know you're losing a couple, but it's a net gain, which means there's more games next year, which means more of an issue.
The conference is only getting better when you add Arizona, and you add an Arizona State team that has a lot of potential. So, yeah, they got to figure this out because, I already went on one rant tonight. I don't want to do another, but the way that ESPN covers the Big 12 is outrageous and asinine.
And unfortunately, that issue is not going to be fixed by tomorrow afternoon when the teams will duke it out on ESPN Plus. So that's our Big 12 preview. It takes place in Kansas City, Missouri. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.